Hi guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'm Beka Haze, and this is Makeup with Your Mental Health, where I'm a normal person that talks to you like a normal person. And today, we're going to be talking about triggers, what they are, why we need to talk about them, and why we need to have them. So, let's begin. All right, can't dilly-dally anymore. Let's get to it. And today we're going to be talking about triggers. And I'm also going to mention that I'm not wearing any wonderful nails today because my fingers needed a break. Now, what is a trigger? A trigger is something that we need to talk about because I feel like a lot of people don't understand what truly a trigger really is. Now, there's mostly the understanding that triggers happen in a lot of stress-related and anxiety-related diagnoses. Now, a trigger is a reminder of a past trauma, and often they are negative responses to unprocessed trauma. Usually, a trigger is a result of overwhelming sadness and fear and anxiety and anger, but not all the time. Sometimes they can have positive reactions, but usually, more often than not, they're overwhelming and there's no warning to be able to tell you when a trigger is about to happen. They just come on randomly. That means when you first are finding out that and realizing that you're having triggers, when you can realize what type of things trigger your emotional and physical flashbacks, whether they are your physiological feelings of emotions of a flashback or hallucinogenic flashbacks where you feel like they're actually happening in front of you. Once you pinpoint what those triggers are, you're able to hopefully get yourself away from those type of situations until you have proper exposure therapy and whatever you need to have that your therapist recommends. Now, what I'm about to do is a makeup tip that not a lot of people admit to doing, but I can't do sharp edges. So I have no shame in my tape game, and I use electrical tape to make sure my eyeliner is nice and sharp and right to the point. Just gonna pop these bad boys on just like that. Make sure they're right under your bottom eyelashes. Isn't that a look? Make sure they're going the same way, otherwise that'll look pretty wonky funky, eh? Talking about what a traumatic event is and what happens during a triggering episode during these traumatic events. The person that is dealing with the traumatic event is not going to realize the situation that they're in, that they're safe, that they're surrounded by well-loved people, that they're going to be feeling that they're reliving that moment in that moment. And I want to explain what I mean that they're a physiological response. It's because our brain is processing that unprocessed trauma through our oblongata, which is our stress release part of our brain. And in the oblongata, it becomes fight or flight. And our unprocessed trauma is a fear-based response. So one of the most strongest hormones that we have in our body that is processed is fear. And fear is responded through 3 different actions in our lizard brain: fight, flight, or freeze. And it all depends on what your brain is going to say in that moment. Now, the other hormones that are released during a triggering flashback is more than just adrenaline, which is probably, I would have to say, the #1 response, but it is also cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And during a triggering episode, you have adrenaline and cortisol flowing through your body. And you know, logically, you're perfectly fine. But in your brain, in your parasympathetic system, your brain is saying, no, we're in danger. Let's figure it out. Now, triggers take on a lot of different forms. It's not always going to be somebody losing their mind and freaking out. Sometimes it's the same as a panic attack. It can be the same as hyperventilating. It could be the same as going into a depressive episode. I myself, having PTSD, my triggering episodes are typically about 20 minutes to 2 hours long. Once triggers are predicted and patterned and a lot more easier to understand, it is a lot more easier to become familiar with what type of things will start a trigger, whether that is a loud sudden noise, whether that's a gunshot, whether that's loud shouting voices, whether that's something as simple as a car alarm. These are things that are patterned and they're unpredictable and you can't always avoid them. but you are able to set up a safety plan in result of hearing those type of triggers or seeing a trigger or experiencing any type of sensational trigger that may bring on an episode. Now, I've talked a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, but triggers happen in a variety of mental health wellness diagnoses, whether that is any personality disorder, whether that's an anxiety disorder, whether that's with depressive episodes or manic depressive episodes. Triggers are a perfect name for a result of an episode that is out of the norm, abnormal, and needs to be addressed. Now, how is a trigger fear-based? Well, for one, as I had mentioned, the oblongata releases the stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline. It's similar to the experience your brain would be releasing if, say, a mountain lion was stalking you. Now, 1 in 4 people have an anxiety disorder in their lifetime, and 8% of people have post-traumatic stress disorder, which is otherwise known as PTSD. Now, fear is believed to be a normal evolutionary tactic that has kept us safe from danger. But too much prolonged fear changes our brains and changes our response to fear-based issues. And of course, the curse of the bad left eyeliner strikes again. Ready for the pull? Here we go. That didn't hurt at all. By the way, I have absolutely no idea what we're doing with this look today. I'm just kind of playing around with my colors and seeing what's gonna happen. And that's okay too. So another thing I'd like to talk about is, why is a trigger not just a snowflake thing? Now, when people call having triggers a snowflake issue, it diminishes the reality suffering of people like myself that have PTSD and other mental wellness diagnoses. When we talk about triggers and allowing them to be a normal day-to-day accessibility for people like myself and people that have mental wellness diagnoses, then we're having a more kind and more accessible society. And is that really a big deal? Having a society that allows accessibility of people with mental illness, of people that have a 1 in 4 chance of having an anxiety disorder, is allowing a society that is a lot more accepting, a lot more kinder, and not be so afraid to admit that they have a mental wellness diagnosis. That's breaking the stigma. That's the entire reason we're here today. And the thing about post-traumatic stress disorder is that it is not hereditary. It can happen to anybody. It can happen to you no matter your age, race, gender, creed, occupation, and relationship status. Post-traumatic stress disorder does not discriminate. It can happen to you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is a life sentence, because you can live with having it, just like I do. And when I say live with it, I mean you can live successfully with it. You can thrive with any mental wellness diagnosis. Now, next up, I'd love to talk about grounding techniques, as they are typically the best way to help you calm down and work through a triggering episode. Now, the first one I want to talk about is called the 5-step grounding technique. It's where you find 5 senses, 5 things that you can categorize with your 5 senses around you in that exact moment. First, I want you to figure out 5 things you can see. 5 very simple things that you can see. You can see the light from the light fixture. You can see the blue skies in front of you. You can see a green plant on your left side. Things like that. Next, you find 5 things you can hear. You can hear your breathing. You can hear the sound of the people around you. You can hear the sounds of the birds singing. Things like that. And it goes the same with 5 tastes, 5 smells, 5 feelings. Now, what is happening when you're doing this exercise is you are focusing your brain on refocusing away from the trigger, and it is reconnecting that you're not in freeze, fight, or flight. I want to say this eye look that I'm going with is giving me very heavy Beka Just Discovered makeup looks and grade 8 vibes. And that's okay too. I'm working with it. I'm enjoying it. That's all that matters, really. And as always, here we go with our tacky lashes and our tacky host. Now this is a very vital reason why I need more professional lighting, because the majority of my lighting is coming from above me, and now I have bat wings of of shadows of my lashes because they're so big and lifting. Honestly guys, like I have shelves for lashes because of my lighting. Another grounding technique I'd like to talk about is a very simple one. It's getting yourself out of your element and getting outside if you're able to. If it's warm enough where you are, is to get your feet in the grass, because that's going to result in triggering your parasympathetic nervous system, and it's going to rewire and reset your entire anxieties. Now, and if it's too cold, just stick your face out and get some fresh air inside of you. That is going to set it in perfect motion immediately. I feel like a topic this heavy and this big, and lashes this big as well, deserves a big dramatic color. I think we're gonna do black tonight. And there we are. Now that always takes way too long, in my opinion, with this lipstick that I use that I got off of Amazon. And as always, the last thing we need to do is spray. And once again, I would like to say thank you for joining me here again today at Makeup with Your Mental Health. And I would also like to say thank you to everybody that has backed my campaign on Kickstarter and has shared it and talked about it and asked me questions about it. It means the world to me that people are bringing attention to mental health wellness, and also my ability to be able to talk to you about it. Thank you. And thank you for being who you are. I love you guys. Goodbye.